Hi, everyone. Welcome to Dragon's Pearl. I'd like to talk to you today a little bit about awakening. In fact, the theme that I'm probably going to be discussing throughout this year really have to do with sort of the three pillars of spirituality. And the three pillars are awakening, clearing, and embodying. And just briefly for now, awakening is the notion of waking up to your true nature. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit today and going forward from today. Clearing is the process of clearing out of conditioned patterns, belief systems, our ideas, our thoughts, our identifications with that have been embodied. I hate to use that word in that context, but that's what came out. That it had been embodied cellularly, and that we believe in so strongly that it interferes with our ability to see who and what we really are. But after awakening, there's a period of time that's needed to clear out because we're still influenced by many of these conditioned patterns. I'll talk about those another time. And then the third is embodying. And then what that means is to embody your awakening, embodying your clarity in day-to-day life. But today, let me just talk a little bit more about awakening because many people have a bit of misunderstanding about what awakening is. Many of you who are familiar with Zen koans are a type of skillful means that is used in many Zen traditions. And they're usually interactions between a teacher and a student, or maybe situational based events that students are asked to present to a teacher. Zen koans are not things that could be understood by the logical, rational mind. In fact, they're designed to confuse the rational mind until one gives up and has an aha type of insight experience and realizes what the answer to the koan is. But at the end of these koans, there's always a statement that says something like, "And thus he was enlightened." And thus he was enlightened. Well, enlightenment, to be enlightened, is the same as to wake up to your true nature. That phrase, your true nature, is also something that you hear quite often in Buddhism. But what does it mean to wake up to your true nature? Well, in order to describe what it means to wake up to your true nature, we have to understand what your true nature is not. And that's part of what the awakening process is figuring out, well, what is it that you're not? Well, what you're not are your ideas, your beliefs, your thoughts, your identifications. In fact, the very first thought, the one that arises early on in our life and persists throughout a lifetime, is the belief in a separate me, in a separate self. Separate self, in the sense that there's me here and there's you there. There's me there and there's an object here. Me here, object there. Subject and object. That belief is so strong that it rules the world. Well, what awakening is the recognition that the self is empty, that this sense of self is an illusion. The self does not exist. And when that also happens, for many people, but not necessarily all, there's a corresponding awakening to the fact that this is all one thing. There's no separation between self and other. There's no difference between who and what you are and who and what other people you perceive other people are. I'm keeping this really simple because there's multiple layers to this. But some misunderstanding of awakening is that it changes things, that it changes your humanness. And that's a fallacy. What it changes is it doesn't really change anything. It's a shift in your perception. There's a sudden recognition of this non-separateness, of this oneness, of non-duality. There's a phrase that many people might have heard of. I'm paraphrasing this, but after an awakening experience, there might be something to the effect of, everywhere I looked, I saw the face of God. Others might say, oh my God, I am God. Don't misconstrue me here by the use of the word God, it's just a word. In other words, you are everything. There's no separation. Again, there's no separation between who you are and what you perceive. And in fact, that's a key point to understanding and moving beyond understanding and waking up, which is recognize that everything that you perceive as being outside of yourself is just a perception. I perceive this coffee mug on my desk. I perceive the taste of coffee. The fallacy is that there's really coffee here. There's a real thing. The fallacy is that there's a coffee mug here. But this is a real thing. If you explore this deeply, you will see that this is just a perception. It's a perception of an object. We construct this perception. We can get into some neuroscience here. The brain constructs the perception based upon edges and light and reflections. We can go a little bit deeper and get into the physics of it and recognize that light waves from the sun and light sources are reflecting off of this, going through our cornea, through the lens, hitting our retina, and those light photons are stimulating rods and cones in our eye, which then get translated into electrical impulses, which then go to the brain. I don't want to get too involved in the materialistic side of this, but people have examined how vision works, and what you really understand is everything is energy. From that perspective, everything is energy. The objects themselves don't really exist as objects. We just perceive that they do. And I'm not discounting our perception of this object. I'm sitting here sipping coffee. I like my coffee. I like good coffee. I have a preference for coffee. There's no real I here, but there's still a preference for coffee. And I'm kind of addicted to coffee. I like coffee, although I don't drink it all day, just in the morning. The point is, what we think of as out there is nothing more than a perception. Well, where is that perception taking place? That's the real question. It needs to be investigated. Who's perceiving this reality? No, I didn't freeze up. I'm just kind of looking at you. Who's perceiving this? Who's listening to this talk? To wake up, to be enlightened, is to recognize clearly that There's no one here. Perceiving is happening. Awareness is happening. And on top of that, thought happens. But there's an awareness that we're not our thoughts. And suddenly, the experience for some and for many is this expansion, this sense of expansion that into and of becoming infinite, boundless, eternal, spacious awareness. Don't get lost on my words. In my last video, I talked about how Lao-Tzu and Dogen and many others have struggled, and not really struggled, but they've basically said the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. Transmission is beyond words and letters. That which I speak of here can only be pointed to with these words. Any label I use are just labels. I'm pointing to, I might use spacious, boundless, eternal awareness. But in waking, there's often a first experience that, oh, I'm not what I think I am. I'm not this idea of a me. I'm everything. I'm all of it. Part of the investigation is realizing and seeing that every perception of this is dependent upon awareness. When I'm getting trapped in dualistic language. I'm separating perception and awareness, and ultimately they're not separate at all, something I will discuss at a later time, because this is a topic we could talk about forever. I don't want to make this video too long. I don't want to make this video forever, and yet this moment is forever. We tend to think we move in linear time, moment by moment by moment. We're moving to the future. We're coming from the past, we're moving to the future. But take a look right now. Let me ask you this. Can you ever not be in this moment? Can you separate your awareness right now from this moment? Can you? Investigate it. Look. Spoiler alert. You can try. Excuse me, and I encourage you to try. Ultimately, and you need to find this out for yourself, but ultimately you'll learn, you'll see, you cannot separate your awareness from this moment. Sure, you might imagine the past, but that imagination of the past, when is it occurring? No. You could imagine the future. When is that imagination taking place? Right now. In fact, what we talk about as this moment is exactly your awareness. They're not two things. To be present in the moment means you're awake to your reality. You see clearly that this moment is none other than you, and not you, the me, you, this boundless, eternal, infinite you that includes everything. That's what awakening is. You awaken to that. It's a direct experience. It's not something that can be understood up here. It's not something that needs to be parsed and analyzed and studied. That's the problem that all religions have taken. When the mysticism moves into dogma, it becomes a belief. when all the great sages in all the great traditions have all been pointing to the direct experience of your true nature, regardless of what you want to call it. God, Buddha, Tao, all that is, awakeness, awareness, conscious awareness. There's just this. So waking up is that recognition. So how do you wake up? That's probably the next question. Lots of different traditions and techniques. The one that I utilize here is inquiry. In fact, I'll give a plug to my teacher, Fred Davis, has come up with a method he calls the living method of spiritual awakening, of which I am now on his teacher track. Ultimately, I'll have some bona fides in being able to provide this to others. It's a method of assisting or facilitating people in seeing their true nature. I also have a Zen background, and so my ultimate thought is that some kind of combination of the two will eventually develop here as its own unique style or blend of teaching. So I encourage you to, if you have not yet woken up, or if you're not sure, to engage in a practice that works. Inquiry. Who are you? Ask yourself, who am I? What am I? Who is it that's perceiving this world? Who is it that's asking the question? I realize here as I'm sitting here that I started this talk thinking that I was going to talk about the misconception of awakening. So let me kind of end with that, and we'll talk about that a little bit more another time, because the misconception is that once somebody sees their true nature, then they're suddenly going to be different. I don't know, a God, a perfect human being. God knows there's no perfect human beings. We're all human. We all still have our conditioning. That's the whole point of clearing, is to see through that conditioning. But conditioning is strong. Conditioning is strong. We've lived decades, years, decades, lifetimes. Our family has lived lifetimes. Science has been telling us that there are epigenetic influences on this thing, on these units. The experiences of our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents somehow get encoded in our DNA, and it influences how we perceive, process, and react to our perceptions, to this world that we perceive. And so clearing is really where the work is. It's the rare individual that's probably completely clear of all their conditioning. But most of the rest of us, we're human. We make human mistakes. We do human things. Even as simple as eating and drinking coffee, and sitting in front of a computer, and designing some space. The misconception is that awakening means you become someone other than who you are. That's the misconception. You're already who you are. Now, as you clear, the strength of those conditioned patterns might lessen over time. And that's what the clearing process is for. And over time, the third element that I talked about, which is embodiment or embodying, will start to manifest itself more naturally. So I'm trying to keep these under 15 minutes. I believe I've done so. I didn't actually time this, so I do want to keep these somewhat short. I may not actually end up where I thought I was going to end up. I have no script prepared for these. I'm really talking extemporaneously, I start thinking, oh, let me talk about this. And then as you can see, I kind of wind my way around it. But again, going forward, these are 3 areas that we're going to talk about: awakening, clearing, and body. Awakening, clearing, and body. Anyway, thank you for listening today.